want to tell you a story that actually happened about 50 years ago. I was new to the church, and this incident didn't occur at my church. It happened at one of our sister churches. We would go over to a different church on Sunday afternoon for missionary service. So I had never seen this visiting evangelist before or since this incident happened. It was offering time in the sanctuary, and everyone was marching around singing and in good spirits, and happy to be in the house of the Lord. And the evangelist got up at the pulpit and she said, "All right, stop the music, hold it right there. We're going to cast this demon out right now." And I'm thinking, oh, please don't let her come to me. I'm new to the church. I don't know these people. And so she bypassed me, and I'm thinking, ooh. So she went to the back, and there was a little skinny man standing by the door. Now, this evangelist was a plus size woman. So she brings this small little skinny man to the front of the church, and then she wrestles with him, and she gets him down on that cold floor. And then once he's down on the floor, she sat on him. And then she says, "Send me up your handkerchiefs. Send me up your scarves." And people are sending stuff up to the front. And this poor little man, when he got a chance to speak, he looked up at her and he said, "We're all out." And you can't make this kind of stuff up. He said, "We're all out." I guess he would have said anything to get this heavy set woman up off of him. So I was just shocked. I didn't know how to put that in context. So I went back to my own home church, and the presiding bishop came into town. And he got up in the pulpit and he said, "I understand and I hear that there are some evangelists that are going around trying to make a name for themselves by casting out devils and demons." And he warned the beloved of God about doing such practices just for fame and recognition. He gave us a scripture. He referenced Acts, the book of Acts, the 19th chapter, verses 11 through 17. And that story talks about the seven sons of Sceva. And the evil spirit said to those seven sons of Sceva, "Jesus I know, and Paul I know, and Peter I know, but who are you?" So the evil spirit that was in that man leaped on those seven sons of Sceva and overpowered them and prevailed against them. And they fled out of the house naked and wounded. Now, I'm grateful to the Most High God that He has given us power over unclean spirits. And I'm also grateful that the Bible clearly states, "Greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world." That's First John, 4th chapter, 4th verse. Welcome to another adult Christian education lesson. Today's lesson is Jesus cast out legions. It's coming out of Mark, the 5th chapter, verses 1 through 20. Lesson outline, the setting. Excuse the typo. Lesson outline, the setting. Mark, 5th chapter, verses 1 through 5. The conflict. Mark, 5th chapter, verses 6 through 13. The fallout. Mark, 5th chapter, verses 14 through 20. I just have a teeny weeny bit of background to give you. So the disciples had just arrived in the country of the Gadarenes. And they had just experienced a storm on the Sea of Galilee. And that storm taught the disciples a much needed lesson about how Jesus had power over the elements of nature. So the storm subsided when Jesus rebuked the wind and said, "Peace, be still," to the sea. And now the ship had barely reached the other side of the sea when Jesus and his disciples were faced with a severe case of a man that was demon possessed. Now, could you just imagine what those disciples must have thought and how they reacted? They had just survived hearing a howling wind while they were at sea. And now they could hear a man that was screaming. This man was severely tormented, and this man was strong, and this man was running towards them. He was full of cuts. He might have even possibly had been bleeding, and he was naked. Mark's account, it differs a little bit from Matthew's account as it pertains to a few details. See Matthew, the 8th chapter, verse 28. There's no contradictions here, though, because Jesus came into a region in which two cities were situated. So one evangelist wrote about one place, and the other evangelist wrote about the other place, or mentioned the other location. And both Mark and Luke tell about one man, but in the book of Matthew, it speaks of two men. So apparently, Mark and Luke gave their attention to the one man who was more furious in his behavior. Let's go into the lesson. Verse number 1. And they came over onto the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gadarenes. So this man lived among the tombs, and he saw Jesus from a great distance. And I'm already into verse number 2. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. So observe how Mark called the description of the demons an unclean spirit. Now, how many unclean things do you think we'll deal with in today's lesson? Let me give you a few of them. Here we have the mention of an unclean spirit. And also to the Jews, tombs or dead people were considered to be unclean. Also, the swine or the pigs were considered to be unclean. And some of the Jews even considered Gentiles to be unclean. So the wicked angel or demons are not a separate class of wicked angels. They are those who follow Satan in his rebellion when he proposed to be like the Most High God. And I'll reference Isaiah 14:14 there. Verse number 3. Who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him. No, not with chain. So people tried to control this man with no success. Chains couldn't hold the man. And because he was possessed by these evil spirits, he had unusual strength. His life must have been miserable, and there was very little rest for him. We are not told why or how he got into this situation, but we do know that he did not live in the city. He was known by the inhabitants of the city, however, because they could hear him crying day and night. How sad. Verse number 4. Because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces. Neither could any man tame him. The word fetters here is related to one's foot or instep. So that shows that the man had been bound around his feet, and the chains were probably put around his hands and arms. But no matter how they tried to bind him, he broke all of their bonds. He simply could not be restrained. He had often been bound with fetters, and that word bound is in the present tense, which indicates the binding was done carefully and thoroughly. You know, Jesus came to set the captives free. He frees people from chains, and those that are bound, he allows them to be loosed. And he doesn't attempt to control people. Verse number 5. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. Crying here means a loud screeching noise or screaming. And observe that he used a sharp stone for cutting himself. So the cuts and the scars probably eventually covered the man's body. And in terms of cutting, that means to cut in pieces. Luke also tells us that this man didn't wear any clothes. See Luke, the 8th chapter, verse 27. So this man was grievously tormented. And let me tell you about people that are tormented. That spirit that's tormenting a person is not satisfied just tormenting that person, it wants to torment others. And here you see this man being tormented, and he's crying and screaming day and night. So that's tormenting others. And now we live in a society where people are suicidal. But instead of them just killing themselves, they want to torment others. So they'll go out and they'll commit mass murders, mass shootings, and then turn the gun on themselves. Like I said, those spirits are not satisfied just tormenting that person. They want to use that person to torment others. Let's move on. Verse number 6. But when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshiped him. So the tormented man came to his senses. He thought clearly enough to see and recognize Jesus, and he knew who Jesus was, and he ran. Now, this is very important. Observe that he recognized who Jesus was. And what did he do? He worshiped him. Now, there wasn't any organized worship service like what we're used to, where you go into the church and they say, all right, it's time for worship service. Come on, let's worship God. And we don't know how he worshiped God. But notice that the spirits that were inside this man, they too recognized Jesus. And they started begging him not to be tormented. Now, it would be nice if we could learn from this that it's a wonderful thing to always worship God. And it's nice to enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise, to be thankful unto him and to bless his holy name. No one should have to admonish you to come into God's house and to worship him. And we don't know how this man worshiped Jesus. We don't know whether he just bowed before our great Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, but we do know that he paid him homage and respect. Verse number 7. And cried with a loud voice and said, what have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. The unclean spirit cried out, acknowledging who Jesus is, and begged him not to be tormented by him. So, in other words, the demons knew who Jesus was. And demons believe in God and they tremble. That's James, the second chapter, verse number 19. Now, Jesus welcomed this man, but he did not welcome the unclean spirits. And neither did those pigs or swine, whatever you want to call them. They didn't welcome those spirits either, as you'll see as we continue on in the lesson. It's fascinating that these spirits that are unclean recognize Jesus as being as being the Son of the Most High God. And I believe it was the demons speaking when he said, I adjure thee by God. I adjure thee by God, that thou torment me not. So they must know of their future and how it contains torment for them. See Second Peter, the second verse. The second chapter, verse 4 there. So the demon feared being tormented. It looks that way to me. I don't know how it looks to you, but that's how it looks to me. And isn't it something that they would be afraid of reaping what they sowed? The spirit stated, what have I to do with thee? So these spirits knew that they had nothing in common with Jesus. Verse number 8. For he said unto him, come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. Verse number 9. And he asked him, what is thy name? And he answered, saying, my name is Legion, for we are many. Now, if you're a teacher and you're in a classroom and you say, get out of here, everyone will look around and they'll think, well, who is she talking to? Who's the teacher talking to? But if that teacher specifically states one student's name and they tell that person by name to get out, then there's no, doubt about who is being expelled out of that classroom. So observe that the name here is singular. Jesus apparently wanted that demon spirit to speak because he asked him, what is thy name? Do you think that he already knew that spirit by name? I think he did. By asking this question, Jesus was placing himself in a position of authority over the demon spirit. And the demon responded, my name is Legion, for we are many. So, how is Legion defined? Well, it's defined as being a company of 6,826 Roman soldiers. So the term legion usually meant that you had a symbol of greatness and that you represented an irresistible power. And these spirits had taken up residence in this man. Verse number 10. And he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. So this was a country where the residents cared more about their money than they did about a human soul. And these spirits didn't want to go away from a country that had that type of values. The demon begged Jesus that he would not send them out of that country. But it appears that the one demon was pleading on behalf of all the demons that he represented. Verse number 11. Now there was sitting nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding. So a nearby herd of swine were feeding, and according to verse number 13, it was about 2,000 animals that were in this herd. And only Mark tells us that there were 2,000 pigs or swine. And more than likely, the owners of the pigs or the swines were not all pagan Gentiles. Some might have been Jews as well. And if that was the case, then these animals would have been violating the law of Moses. I'm going to reference Leviticus there, the 11th chapter, verses 7 through 8. Verse number 12. And all the devils besought him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. The word devils here is plural, and that can be translated as demons because there's only one devil who's the leader over many demons. But these demons still begged Jesus to send them into the swine that were on the mountain. They were located on the mountainside, and we're not told why they asked for this request. But I guess what we can possibly surmise is that these demons didn't want to be outside of a physical body. So, yes, demons can inhabit animals. Verse number 13. And forthwith Jesus gave them leave. And the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. They were about 2,000 and were choked in the sea. So Jesus yielded to the demons' request and gave them leave. Now, these spirits recognized that they were subject to Jesus. So they went out of the man and entered into the swine. Now, people that are not spiritually able to discern spirits wouldn't have seen these spirits leave and actually go into the swine. But everyone could see the effects of what happened once the demon spirits were dislodged from the man and once those spirits entered into the swine. And even in our day, you can see the effects of unclean spirits still at work. How can you tell they're still at work? Well, what is their job? They came to kill, to steal, and to destroy. Then the swine became wild and they killed themselves. The entire herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea and were choked. Let's move on. Verse number 14. And they that fed the swine fled and told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what it was that was done. So those who cared for the swine were distraught and they were shocked at what had happened. Those folks could not control the man in whom those spirits were, once um, inhabiting. And now they couldn't control the swine. Those pigs ran violently down into the water. And to top it all off, these folks lost a great deal of money. The entire herd of 2,000 pigs were destroyed. So these folks went into the city and everywhere and they spread the news and they told everybody about what had happened. And those who heard the news, they did go out to see what it was that was done. Verse number 15. And they came to Jesus to see him that was possessed with the devil and had the legion, sitting, clothed, and in his right mind. And they were afraid. So now this man is sitting. Before, when he saw Jesus, he ran. And those spirits entered into the swine or into the pigs. And what did those pigs do? They ran. But now this man is sitting. He's clothed. He's no longer naked. He's in his right mind. And they should have been more afraid of him when he wasn't in his right mind. According to Matthew 8:28, no one wanted to go past that way because of this man. Before he was screaming and he was extremely strong. So why in the world are these people afraid of this man now? Notice what it says, that they were afraid. Let's go on. Do you see where this man ever asked Jesus to deliver him? Observe that this man got delivered, but no one laid hands on the man. So, all total, how many prayers do you think were offered up in today's lesson? Let's take a recap. There were two prayers made by unclean spirits. Then there was a third prayer made by the townspeople. They asked Jesus to depart out of their coast. And then there was a fourth prayer. And as far as I can tell, this is the only prayer made by this man. This man requested that he be allowed to go with Jesus. Verse number 16. And they that saw it told them how it befell to him that was possessed with the devil, and also concerning the swine. Verse number 17. And they began to pray him to depart out of their coast. Verse number 18. And when he was come into the ship, he that had been possessed with the devil prayed him that he might be with him. Now that shows this man was in his right mind, because he showed good sense there wanting to be with Jesus. Verse number 19. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but saith unto him, Go home to thy friends, and tell them how great things the Lord has done for thee, and has had compassion on thee. Now, what I need you to see in this verse is that it doesn't say anything about his family. It just told him to go home to thy friends. It doesn't say go home to your family, but maybe you can surmise that that meant friends and family. It's up to you. But it's always good for people that have been delivered from whatever has been, laid on you as far as an affliction, to go and to tell others about the great things that the Lord has done for you. Verse number 20. And he departed and began to publish in Decapolis how great things Jesus had done for him, and all men did marvel. So there was a great change in this man, and all men did marvel. The end. My summary and conclusion. Jesus calls us to share what he has. Next week's lesson, who is like God? That'll be coming out of Isaiah, the 40th chapter, verses 12 through 17. Until next time, be blessed.